the Hollywood Unapologetic Podcast with Orlando Delbert, Filmmaking Essentials.
Today, we're stepping into a film that manages to be both outrageously funny and profoundly important. Charlie Chaplin's 1940 masterpiece, The Great Dictator.
A real classic.
Absolutely. Some fantastic material with us, looking at everything from its visual style, its power as protest.
The final speech, of course.
How it was received, and even Chaplin looking back on it later. So our goal is to really unpack why this film, still holds such sway. What makes it tick?
It's a really rich set of sources we've got. Salik Wakwas from Color Vulture. His piece really unpacks the cinematography as political commentary. It's brilliant stuff.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then there's Felicia Elliott's essay, Comedy as Protest. That gets into the sheer guts it took, the risk involved.
Definitely.
Plus, we'll dig into that iconic speech, look at how people reacted back then using historical accounts, and like you said, Chaplin's own thoughts years later.
Maybe start with something you don't always think about first with comedy. How the film looked, how the cinematography played into its message.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The guys behind the camera, Carl Struss and Roland Tetherow, they were veterans, right, from the silent era.
Oh, interesting. Like Keaton films.
Exactly. Sherlock Jr., the General.
Yeah.
Big names. And that background, that silent film sensibility, you can really see it influencing Chaplin's visual approach here.
So it wasn't just about pointing and shooting.
Not at all. And remember the timing, 1940.
Yeah.
War raving in Europe, the U.S. still on the sidelines, officially neutral anyway.
A tense moment.
Hugely. And Chaplin, he deliberately wanted to use the film to build empathy for the persecuted, particularly Jewish people, and just to show how utterly absurd these dictators were.
So the camera becomes a weapon almost.
In a way, yeah. A tool for political commentary, absolutely. Not just about pretty pictures.
And that comes through so clearly in that famous Globe scene, doesn't it? Hinkle playing with the world.
Oh, yeah. Iconic.
Wakwas, in that color culture piece, he really highlights how the camera moves there. Smooth, deliberate. It's not just flair.
No, it invites you in, makes you question power. How it can become this, childish, destructive game.
It's such a perfect visual metaphor, that fragility, the ego.
Exactly. Unchecked tyranny is a nursery game. So yeah, Chaplin and his team, they are really using the visual language, weaponizing it, you could say, to tear down the dictators and lift up their victims. Pretty groundbreaking for the time.
Definitely sounds like it. And Wakwas mentions the composition, too, how they framed things.
Yeah, he calls it revolutionary, actually. How often you see the victims, the oppressed characters, right there in the foreground. They command your attention, your empathy.
While the dictators are
pushed to the edges, often caricatured. It visually strips away that, the usual pomp and circumstance of leaders.
Right. It forces you to see the human cost. Forget the speeches. Look at the people affected.
That's exactly the feeling. It's like the visuals are bypassing the rhetoric.
And the lighting feeds into that too, right? I remember reading about the contrast.
Oh, absolutely. Wakwas points this out clearly. Soft, sort of gentle light on the oppressed characters. It gives them this warmth, this hope almost.
Compared to the dictators.
Harsh light, theatrical. It really accentuates their grotesque features sometimes. Makes the good versus evil divide incredibly stark visually.
So it's all very deliberate. Framing, lighting. What about blocking, how people are positioned?
That too. You get these really intimate close-ups of the barber, his eyes. You feel his humanity, his vulnerability.
And Hinkle.
Often wider shots, emphasizing the ridiculousness, the buffoonery. Wakwas calls the lens a moral arbiter, guiding how we feel.
Wow. A moral arbiter. That's a strong statement.
It is. But it fits, I think. And even though it's black and white, the use of contrast, texture, the emotion, it feels incredibly vibrant. Those shades of gray become symbolic hope, despair, all of it.
Okay, so the visuals are packed with meaning, but the comedy itself, the title, The Great Dictator, says it all. Felicia Elliott's essay digs into this, right? Comedy as protest. That took guts back then.
Incredible guts. You look back at 1938, when Chaplin first floated the idea of parodying Hitler. Well, the reaction wasn't exactly enthusiastic from the studio.
Really? You'd think.
Well, think about it. German market distribution was a big deal financially. Plus, many studio heads had Jewish families still in Europe. They were understandably terrified.
So Hollywood was playing it safe.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Very wary of sticking their necks out politically, especially with the U.S. not yet in the war. Isolationism was strong.
But Chaplin had his own studio.
Exactly. That was crucial. United Artists. It gave him the freedom to say, nope, I'm doing this. Elliott really stresses how vital that independence was.
Even though it caused him trouble later, during the Red Scare.
That's a whole other story, but yes. Elliot also brings up that uncanny resemblance between Chaplin and Hitler,
Right. They looked so similar.
and the theory that maybe, just maybe, that initially made it harder for some Americans to take Hitler seriously. Like, he looks like the tramp, how bad can he be?
That's a chilling thought. So did Chaplin ever hesitate? Did anyone try to talk him out of it internally?
The sources don't give us, like, transcripts of meetings, but Elliot really emphasizes Chaplin's conviction. He felt he had to do it. It was a moral urgency for him.
And the resemblance, he turned it around.
Totally. He used that likeness brilliantly, not to downplay the threat, but to make it undeniable, putting it right there in a familiar comedic context. It made the message accessible.
But there were still worries. Censorship, distribution.
Well, for sure. United Artists, the British censors,
Yeah.
they were nervous. But Chaplin was adamant. His famous line was, "Hitler must be laughed at." He knew comedy could cut through the fear.
And the film definitely goes for the laughs. Hinkle's speeches.
Pure gibberish. Hilarious guttural nonsense.
And then you've got classic Chaplin slapstick, like the shaving scene, or Hannah with the frying pan against the stormtroopers.
Exactly. Elliot points out how he layers that broad humor with sharper satire. The constant parallels between the barber and Hinkle, the little guy, versus the egomaniac.
It's clever. And some of the digs feel so direct, almost modern.
Right, like Hinkle's ridiculous wave, that sort of effeminate flick of the wrist.
Or the globe dance.
The globe dance, pure genius.
Yeah.
And his rivalry with Napoleone, Mussolini's stand-in, it's all just blatant mockery, taking their actual mannerisms and amplifying them into absurdity. It feels very familiar to how we see political satire work today.
It really does. So what ultimately makes The Great Dictator stand out so much in the history of satire? Elliot's take.
Well, she argues it's not just the resemblance or the gags or even how good the film is technically. It's the sheer risk involved at that specific moment in time.
Releasing it in 1940.
Yeah, just as the world was truly starting to grasp the horror, that context gave it immense power. She draws lines to more recent stuff, too, like The Interview.
Right.
And argues that comedy can challenge authoritarian figures in a unique way. It's not a physical threat, but it chips away at their power, their mystique.
So it's funny, but it's also fundamentally an act of defiance. Laughter as resistance.
That's the core of it. And Elliot notes it works because it finds that balance. It's genuinely funny, but it never loses sight of the serious message, which, of course, leads right into
the final speech. Probably the most famous, most analyzed part of the film.
Absolutely. And it's such a dramatic shift, isn't it? He just drops the character.
Completely. Stops being the barber, steps forward as Chaplin, and speaks directly to us.
Yeah, it totally breaks the narrative frame. He's pleading for unity, for kindness, for democracy, rejecting empire, rejecting hate.
It's incredibly powerful, contrasting human connection with technology used for destruction.
Yes, and calling on soldiers, on everyone really, to resist tyranny, to fight for liberty, for a world based on reason and happiness.
And that line, the kingdom of God is within man.
Such a profound statement. That the power for change is within us, within ordinary people.
It must have been jarring for audiences expecting pure comedy, though. Was it criticized at the time?
It was, yeah. Some critics felt it was preachy, out of place, broke the film's tone. But looking back, its message, where it feels incredibly relevant today, doesn't it? That warning against hate, that call for hope.
More relevant than ever, perhaps. And that connection, the fact that Chaplin and Hitler were born within days of each other.
April 1889. It's uncanny, like these opposite poles of humanity, as one source put it, both reflecting the anxieties of the little man in the modern world, but taking drastically different paths.
One towards empathy, one towards evil.
Pretty much. And Chaplin was clear. You didn't need to be Jewish to oppose the Nazis. You just had to be a normal, decent human being.
A powerful stance. So, shifting gears a bit, how did audiences and critics react overall back in 1940? This was his first proper sound film, right? A big deal for him.
Huge deal. He had held on to silent film for so long, but despite the heavy subject, it was actually a massive hit.
Really? Commercially?
Yeah, big commercial success. And critics mostly loved it. They recognized its importance right away. Many called it one of the greatest comedies ever, but also historically significant.
Any awards? Oscar buzz?
Oh, yeah. 5 Academy Award nominations. Best Picture, Best Actor for Chaplin, Best Original Screenplay. He also won awards from the National Board of Review, New York Film Critics Circle. Its legacy is solid. It was added to the National Film Registry in '97.
Wow. But then there's Chaplin's later comment, a really sobering one.
Right. Saying that if he had known the full extent, the true horror of the concentration camps, he might not have been able to make the film, especially the comedy.
That just hangs over it, doesn't it? Knowing that now.
It really does. It adds another layer entirely.
And what about the barber character? Was he just the tramp with a different hat or something new?
That's debated. Some see him as basically the tramp, allowing Chaplin to tackle politics through a familiar face. Others argue he's distinct. Chaplin himself seems to have waffled on it a bit over the years.
Interesting. And I read something about a lawsuit.
Yeah, plagiarism suit. Conrad Bercovici claimed Chaplin used his ideas. It was settled out of court, apparently. Standard Hollywood stuff, maybe.
Perhaps. But the film's influence is undeniable.
Absolutely. So many later satires owe it a debt. And that final speech just keeps echoing, doesn't it? Sampled in music, played at events. It lives on.
It's incredible. But it's also wild to think that years later, Chaplin, the guy who made this powerful anti-fascist statement, was essentially kicked out of the U.S. during the Red Scare.
The irony is staggering, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fused of communist sympathies.
And the final little bizarre footnote, did Hitler actually see it?
That's the million-dollar question. Albert Speer said no. But another account claims Hitler watched it twice, alone.
Wow, can you imagine?
Chaplin apparently said he'd give anything to know what Hitler thought. We'll likely never know for sure.
Okay, so wrapping this up, bringing it all together, what are the big takeaways for someone listening?
Well, I think fundamentally, The Great Dictator is just this towering example of film as a tool. For satire, for social commentary, it's incredibly potent.
Right. You've got the cinematography doing heavy lifting.
Absolutely. Innovative, political. Then the comedy itself, so brave, so biting for its time.
And that speech, which still hits hard.
Exactly. It all adds up to this landmark film, historically, artistically. It really paints this vivid picture, even without color, of that struggle between humanity and tyranny.
It really does.
And maybe a final thought to leave people with. Thinking about Chaplin's later reflection, about the camps, how does knowing that change how we watch the film now? Does it make the message even stronger? Or does it make the comedy feel uncomfortable, maybe?
Complicated.
It forces us to think about satire, its power and its responsibility, especially when dealing with the darkest parts of history.
A lot to think about there.
You can find more insights on navigating the entertainment industry and achieving success in Orlando Delbert's work, including his book, Pollyanna's Tear-Soaked Battlefields of Hollywood, a survival guide against the cynicism and the hypocritical, and of course, the Hollywood Unapologetic platform. And always remember, you are the key to your own success. You are the new Hollywood generation.
Be informed, be prepared, and most importantly, be great.
That's it. Be great. Good luck out there.
See you next time.